Oh,
Hello, Toshiko.
hello, how are you? I don't know what's happening. I was clicking, but
No, it's okay. It's okay. Perfect. So thank you. It's really good to see you here. So let me just,
can
okay.
you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah,
I can
thank
hear
you.
you well, so I suppose you can hear me well from there.
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Okay, it's really good to see you here. So welcome to our new live talk today.
And thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for accepting our invitation. This live interview is held as part of WAC's World a live interview series. So before jumping into my questions, I would like to give a short introduction about you and your office to our audience. Toshiko Mori is the founding principal of Toshiko Mori Architect, and she is a Robert P. Hubbard Professor in the practice of architecture at the Harvard GSD, where she served as chair of the Department of Architecture from 2002 to 2008. She was inducted to the Academy of Arts and Letters 2015. 20 this year, yes. And she has been Fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences in 2016. Toshiko Mori Architect was founded in 1981, which is a New York-based office. The office has worked on a large number of projects, including urban master plans, civic, cultural, residential, museum, and exhibition design. And the studio's recent projects include master plans for the Brooklyn Public Library Central Branch and a greenhouse expansion at the Buffalo Botanical Gardens, TRED Cultural Center and artist residences, as well as Fast School and Teachers Residence, which were built in Senegal, which will be our focus in the discussion. And Watson Institute for International and Public Affairs, Stephen Roberts 62 Hall at Brown University, which was completed in 2018. Toshiko Mori received prestigious awards and honors, including the Tau Sigma Delta National Honor Society Gold Medal in 2016, Architectural Records Women in Design Leader Award in 2018, and the American Institute of Architects ACCA Topaz Medallion for Excellence in Architectural Education in 2019. Nikkei Business recently listed Mori as one of 50 Japanese people changing the world, and Newsweek Japan listed her as one of 100 Japanese people the world respects. Her project, TRED Artist Residency and Cultural Center, was awarded the American Institute of Architects 2017 Institute Honor Award for Architecture and was one of the winners of the inaugural FIBRA Award in Contemporary Plant Fiber-Based Architecture in 2019. This year, she published 2 new monographs, one with A plus U magazine for their February issue, and another with Architangle titled Toshiko Mori Architect Observations in May. Her project, Fast School and Teachers Residence, was featured by The Guardian as one of the world's top 10 new architecture projects, and congratulations for that. So our session themed Learning from the Context will discuss the projects for both projects, Fast School and Teachers Residence, built in Senegal, as these projects are great examples of innovative work, considering their own context and scale by using local knowledge, local materials, and enhancing the participatory process in the rural village. Because recently the notion of innovation is perceived and shifting a little bit differently, as this term is tried to be understood or correlated with the use of new materials or high-tech applications, which we sometimes see a sense of belonging is being lost in several buildings. So we want to discuss and focus on these 2 projects in terms of the context to show how can local knowledge can be a driving force for an innovative project, enhancing usability and sense of ownership. So before starting my question, dear Toshiko, I would like to ask, how is your mood? How do you feel as we are experiencing quite suppressing times as the whole world, because of the pandemic, Is there anything to say or share about the general situation that we are in?
Yes, thank you, first of all, for inviting me to speak to you and your audience. And I'm in New York, I'm in the United States. As many of the people in the United States and the rest of the world, we are very anxious about election results, which is going to affect everything globally. So we are anxious, and we are living in very uncertain times with full of turbulence. And with pandemic situation, our work habit has changed greatly. We are all working remotely. I've been teaching remotely, so I miss my colleagues, my team, my students. But we're trying the best to connect with each other like we are doing. I can never see you in person so far away, but we have this conversation together. So we are trying the best we can. And what we are trying to do is really focus on what's important and what's valuable, and centering our psyche and spirits so that we won't be distracted by a lot of noise and some disinformation around it. So if you're focused, we can really see what's truly happening and to be aligned with our own convictions and value systems going forward. Unfortunately, this is a time we are all on our own, and we can't depend on anybody to tell us what's really going on. We just have to do it ourselves.
Yeah, we need to experience it a little bit. I hope it will end soon. So coming back to my questions, you have designed significant two projects in Senegal, Thread Artist Residences and Cultural Center built in 2015, and Fast School Teachers Residence built in 2019, which they are incredibly beautiful and selected by The Guardian as one of the world's top 10 new architecture projects in terms of the use of material and the clarity of the projects in terms of their geometry as well and shape. Before going into the details of the projects, we want to focus on the place itself, which is the key principle I see in your projects, and their design stories from scratch. So how did your relationship start with Senegal first? Because you have been teaching at the Harvard GSD and you have arranged many travels with your students and advanced seminars with your, across the world, starting from Finland to Senegal. So can we say that your travels were a starting point of these projects? So could you please tell us about the story of these buildings from the beginning?
Oh, so yes and no, because as you say, place means a lot in my projects, and every single project of mine, even in New York, is very place specific with its community. So it's a very important idea that you point out to us. And travel also is very important. You have to go out of a comfort zone, and that's one of the reasons at Harvard I often take students. In this semester, it was a virtual travel into the identity of African American communities, but I've taken them to remote parts of Finland or Japan so that students will be exposed to other parts of the world and to really gain ability as architects to try to understand what is going on in other people's lives, which you can summarize it as a word empathy, which is a very important capacity for architects to develop, which we don't teach academically. So viscerally, it's important. But your question of starting the project in Senegal did not start with the travel of a place. I have not traveled it. And as you mentioned before, it's my encounter with Joseph and Annie Arber's foundation. And I was designing exhibitions at Cooper Hewitt Museum, the first exhibition that shows a work together of Joseph and Annie Arbers. They are a couple, and he's a painter, artist, amazing professor at Yale and elsewhere, and Annie Arbers known for her weaving. But they don't collaborate, they never exhibited together. So when I helped design the exhibition, I met the director, Nicholas Fox-Weaver, and we really had this amazing how do I say, sympathy about each other and the mission of our buses. And he told me about projects they are doing in remote community in Senegal for nearly 2 decades, in which they've been helping communities to provide medical help, to develop and build clinics in Western Africa, where it has one of the highest rate of infant and maternal mortality. And there was never been a Western medicine introduced there. So they've been doing in a very small way, sending doctors from Paris to help the community. Eventually, they helped build several clinics and kindergartens and even farming schools. So they've been there for 20 years. And they just mentioned to me about this community and possibility to perhaps do a research with my students about future of these communities. And now, because it started from clinic but kept building up into larger area, and I think they are developing community within those 2 decades for them to run these places. And so they started with a medical issue, educational with kindergarten, farming with economy, and then now they're thinking, because they're a cultural organization anyway, that they would want to start a cultural institution there, which is, they have an Albers residency program outside of New Haven. It makes so much sense that to enhance the cultural richness of this particular community. That's how it started. So.
Yeah, so were there any mandatory demands compared to the traditional, the general project brief? Were there any mandatory demands in the project that you need to follow in the design process? Special requests, anything?
Well, one, this community is in very remote location, about 7 hours from capital of Dakar. Mm-hmm. So it's very, and then it's very poor and resource, how do I say, underserved, and also resource scarce. So the demand is very unusual, that I had to work with local material, with the local people, and then just really literally very little material. It's not only expensive, it's difficult to transport materials. So those are the demands. And also another issue is the respecting of this community. And that's in discussion with Albers Foundation. We came to terms very quickly how not to impose our preconception about this community, how to really observe what is happening in the community so that this particular building can be helpful and can survive beyond just building buildings. So in a way, we had no preconception as to what to build. It organically evolved with observation and discussion with the community members and Albers Foundation. So it started with a really modest footings. And I'm in a shock that it's gotten so much attention worldwide, because it is probably the least known and poorest and very difficult to get to places. So it's a very, very modest beginning.
Yeah, Trade Artist Residences, Cultural Center and Fast School look like each other, of course, but they are quite innovative related to its contents, as I mentioned before, specifically their thatched roofs using bamboo framework, which have beautiful undulating form complements the building. Even someone can detect the building from far away from their roofs, which is a good signal for the community. Is used for also the collection of the water to help an association of local women to raise their crops during the dry season, while the space brick sections of the walls help airflow throughout the interiors, which see the project was strongly driven by the climatic conditions and data, making also the maintenance of the building easy by the community. I'm telling all of this because it's not to design everything properly at the same time, which are quite important. So I think I see that it's the right place and the right project to talk about the innovation in its own scale. where this term is generally describe new technologies and advanced technologies, high-tech materials, like sci-fi visuals, past applications which are employed in large-scale buildings. As I said before, these are quite very, very good example of innovation in such a small rural area by introducing new craftsmanship and new structural system. And as we know, your focus is based on scarcity-driven design, the structural innovations in every scale. So how would you describe your design philosophy in general, or what is the first input that takes you to innovation in the design process? Do you focus on the functionality of the building first and the inputs or the context itself, then the innovative idea that comes later with the process? Or it's just a whole holistic approach that work at the same time?
I would say, I think our approach is holistic, that we do not separate context with a function or social aspects of a community per se. But what we do is we do observe a lot, which we really try to get ourselves out to make it zero, to blank slate, and to really go into the community to see what is happening and what is working and how they live and how they work. And by this very close observation, one actually understands what's essential to the community and also what might be missing, what might be suffering. So when you talk about innovation, it's often associated with technological innovation, which is like a wow factor. You come up with something, oh my God, things get faster, easier, or all of the above. But in a community like this, innovation takes place in observing one small thing, perhaps, but then really thinking about chain link effect of how one thing can be corrected or improved so that it actually have implications of exponential impact. That's how I would think of innovation, that it just one, it can be something very small change, but always think of series of impact, imagining impact, and to see what is a scale of impact. Of course, largest impact is very good, but even some modest impact can greatly improve everyday life of people. And I think for my goal for innovation is really improvement of a quality of life of people. So that's...
Yeah, that leads me to another question, open up the discussion on a global scale maybe. As we said, it is a notion of scale grows in cities. We see that a sense of belonging disappears in the building, or desiring spending hours in one building diminishes because people just enter, experience it, and go out of the building. So it's not easy to grasp that feeling in every structure. We agree that, but I see in your building scale, innovative idea, usability, functionality, and the feeling of sense of belonging are very well balanced. It's not easy to make such a building that people can always feel belonging to. So what, when you look at the global scale, where do you think these interrelationships disappear? How do we position as architects the notion of innovation and a sense of belonging in architecture? Is this a scale that determines the issue of this authenticity or the context itself? Or it is directly related with the technology and the need developments? So how do you evaluate this relationship?
Well, that's actually one of the most important questions we are all struggling with, especially now, because of pandemic. We are highly dependent on technology, and then technology is scaleless, and it could be broad and big, but it could be very small at personal scale, and then it's non-spatial, and it doesn't have depth, it doesn't have a breadth, it's quite flat. So in this circumstance of isolation, the scaleness experience is enhancing a question like what you are asking. And then, but at the same time, because of it, I think this question you ask about presence of scale in buildings, that becomes more important because our experiences become more precious. Like I really love the fact that once in a while I go into the office, maybe 2, 3 of us are working. I finally see my colleague live, or I go into this around the corner to a cafe, and they have sidewalk cafe in New York City, and I can sit down in the air. I can see people on the street. All of a sudden, all these human scale experiences become something very important, valuable, and precious. So there's a silver lining in this crazy experience we are working through in pandemic, in which I think we will reevaluate the environment as something that's needing human scale experiences. So it's not really about anonymous. I don't think anyone would want to go into huge anonymous spaces, elevators, and then in human spaces to be working. I think everybody will looking for human, otherwise you stay home, it's safer. And I think it has to be attractive to go to spaces and want to, and it's a community. It's something you can experience at the scale of a human body.
So the physicality will be needed, so we cannot just avoid of the physicality even if we are experiencing this situation, you said.
Yeah.
I mean, every human, every building should have a human experience and should be perceived from closely, you say, as I understand. We need to experience that space inside.
Right, because otherwise no one would want to go. There's no need. And then it's much more convenient and safer to be staying at home. But there's issues of being with a human community and to be collaborating. And especially when you speak about innovation, innovation is a collective effort. It's very difficult to do in isolation. And then when you are collaborating, you are in real time exchanging information, opinions. That's when all these ideas emerge. So I think the real spaces are still important for knowledge-based economy. And I think to create a space which is attractive and also functional for such activities is a challenge of our future. So.
Yeah, that's true. So my other question, Trade Artist Residence and Culture Center and Fast School are located in an empty plot, which they have no buildings around them, and there is no any reference system for you to buildings that should rely on, apart from their just contextual inputs and parameters. On the other hand, you have another building ground up in 277 Mott Street in the Lower Manhattan. They're quite opposite each other. The building is only perceived from the front, sits on a very narrow plot, which you have many limitations in design. So I would like to ask, are there any differences between designing in an empty site and designing in a site which has limitations in the freedom of thinking? Which condition is more challenging for you?
So that's a very interesting question because it's idea of a context, and even the project in Senegal, they are in empty flat lots. It has enormous amount of context. As you know, Senegal is 90% Muslim. It's a progressive, a more liberal Muslim practice. But then I had to create spaces that men and women can gather separately, for example. And then idea of a dryness and extreme heat. In a way, the Senegal project as a context had more restrictions and difficulties than the project in Manhattan. In Manhattan is very dense, the space is limited, but then I could get anybody to work, I can get material from anywhere. And in a way, there's certain freedom of economy, which is not allowed in Senegal, that I was limited with material you can only get from its own land, like mud brick, bamboo, and a thatch made out of grass growing on the site. So, but there's more choices, of course, in Manhattan. And then, yes, there are landmark restrictions, but then in the Senegal project, we learn idea of buildings, for example, school buildings traditionally has a corrugated metal roof, and concrete blocks, and learned that during the summertime, it gets very hot and the kids can't stay there. When it rains, the sound is so loud that kids can't listen to lessons. So we have to go outside of whatever material they are provided and the footprint to kind of invent something within the context of limitation of classrooms and things like that. So it's so interesting that idea of a site may not be equal to what you call the limitation of context. So
are you planning to travel to Senegal to see the projects, how it is used, how it is experienced by the children and the community later, or maybe after the pandemic, if there is no any travel limitation in the world?
Yeah, I'd like to visit, but I think there's a photograph of being sent. For example, Fast School, they had a lot of rain. And that's one of the things of technological innovation is that with mobile phone, I can just see what's going on, what they're growing. They just sent me a photograph and they have harvest of fonio. It's a very fine grain, gluten-free. And they are able to harvest honey, make it into products, and they are able to sell them. In a Fast School, because of this incredible amount of rain, they were able to build extra cisterns, and they were able to double the garden, vegetable garden outside of it to 2 hectares, which is done within a year. So I'm getting a lot of updates into it. I would like to visit, but I also am very careful not to extract resources. And then I think they are doing fine. It's run by local people, and then they are innovating on their own, meaning like they figured out to use the rainwater collected from the roof to create an agricultural collective, and mostly run by women. And they grow vegetables, and from a farming school experience, it's very intelligent farming, meaning that it's really counterintuitive that one of the driest places have the most efficient way of farming because they can't fail. The second, they are able to control amount of water better than places where you can't predict rain, lots of rain or no. So they can ration water very carefully, and also they're very careful as to what type of plants, which is resistance against its own weather to survive. And they think of symbiosis of different plants to plant together. So there's actually amazing intelligence that has organically grew out of the procurement innovation, which runs into something quite important in the fact that it provides economic resource to women in a village, and they have money to send kids to school. And also I think there's another element. It's in terms of innovation, it's always much money related, like how much money you make and how much money you save, and money and time. But in these instances, these communities, aquifer has dried up. So the women have needed to go far, women and girls, to procure water, and sometimes very dangerous places. And because of it, girls after elementary school, I think elementary school attendance in Senegal is quite good, but secondary, junior high and secondary, it just drops off because girls are relegated to helping families. But if you are able to have water resources closer to the village, then it actually gives girls time to go to schools. And with Albert's organizations, they demanded that school in FAST, which is the first secular school, which teaches both secular subject matter and Quran, that boys and girls study together. So it has this innovation, also has this social impact, which may not be monetized to call it innovation, but I think those are very important factors to stabilize communities.
Yeah, that's true. So you also recently released a monograph from Architangle, as I mentioned before, Toshiko Mori Architect Observations. And as I understand, your all design ideas based on observations and good observations from the context itself. So could you please elaborate the content of the book? What will readers will see in the book? Is it mainly focusing on your projects or your design methodology that is perpetuated in your observations?
So the book is unusual. As you mentioned, A+U February issue was a more standard monograph. It had my projects, which really has a lot to do, as you started to say, about relationship of my buildings in place, relationship to site. That's the theme. But this Architango publication, Toshiko Mori Architect Observations, shows something outside of it. It shows a process of our work, and also it features two other organizations we run in parallel with my practice, which is unusual. One is Vision Arc, which is a research wing of our office. And we have created the way to look at larger global phenomena, but to be able to break it down in a way only architects can do, which is we always have projects are usually big and large projects, but we are able to look at from perspective of plan or elevation in section. Each sets of drawings have different set of information. So we realize that architect's way of thinking has more holistic way of understanding one phenomena, ability to be able to connect many things to just look at the real picture. So I think it shows the process in which how we deal with it with examples. And what we also have a nonprofit called Paraacustica, which is we have two partners, Jim Bildner, who is a senior associate of Kennedy School of Government at Harvard. He's a lawyer, runs a nonprofit research center there, and Hilda Ochoa Brindenberg from DC. She's in finance, but she's a founder of Youth Orchestra of Americas. So this is a project in which to create and invent a structure, a portable concert hall, so that the concert hall can travel with orchestras such as Youth Orchestra of Americas, originally founded in Venezuela, where the government actually gives each child free music lessons. And this organization promotes music education and civic leadership alongside of it. And they often go to remote places where there are no concert halls. So the idea is to be able to have this concert hall travel with each orchestra in remote communities to make music more accessible and also to discover new talents in remote communities, which they have been doing. And now we are doing a second phase of research in which we have done a prototype, but we have not done the full scale, but we realize that there's improvements that's been done. So at the time being, we're actually coming up with air beam structure, the structure which is completely made out of membrane, no wood, no steel. It's very different from inflatable, but it actually can assemble and disassemble very quickly. You can carry with it in many places, and also to be used for refugee centers, emergency rescue places, or even temporary clinics. So we are actually going into the second phase of multi-use of this idea of temporary structure. So that's actually something. And then I think thirdly, I touch on material research. And then also, as you said, mainly about the process in which we work is through observations. And then to really observation as a tool of research for architects. And I think mainly we have two capacities, enormous capacity to observe and absorb information, to process and to imagine from what we observe materials. So the imagination and observation as two very important pillars of active architects. That's how we can summarize about the book.
Yeah, that's true. Currently, we are experiencing difficult times as we talk. So, can I ask, how has this current situation affected your practice? How did you reshape your all design process or workflow in general, as we are feeling a big rupture in tangible and materialistic things and many things going into digital, as we say?
So our office has been busy, and because we work on many institutional buildings or like a public projects like parks, and they really needed to have libraries or parks opening to serve the community. So we really never stopped during pandemic. Even we had to hire summer help, we had to hire new people, and I think the remote work has been quite productive. We are communicating collectively more frequently instead of team-based, so everybody knows what's going on. And also, what we, as you say, one of the things I miss, I have to go to the office, is to look at material samples and to see how things are built, and that requires site visits, which we miss greatly. But luckily, this phase of the spring to summer to fall, we had to do a lot of planning work, or the projects are already in construction and it was completing. And so in a way, I think different phase of projects can work very well with this remote working mode. But then when it becomes a more of a material choices and idea of fabrications, there's a limit to how much one can work remotely. So we've been going to sites. I think some of the work we've been doing are qualified as essential workers, so we are careful. And
yeah, I guess we are missing the social aspect of architecture and the physical aspect of architecture as we see, because you need to touch the material, you need to experience the building mock-up or anything in a lower scale. So socialize on talking too much, not just from screen to screen. So I hope it will come back soon. So there's another final questions coming from one of our followers, and she's asking for the fascicule, what is the reason of using circular specifically? Because it's very clear and prescribed circular geometry for the school.
All right. So that's a very good question, because one, there's a context, a reference to a historical multi-family structure that existed in that region, which is a round house, and also it's a collected water in the center courtyard. This is a very ancient, nearly archaeological building typology, but these are the kind of houses which is in everybody's mind. So that's actually a very important icon for me to relate to. And second, in America, we have this typology called schoolhouse, which in remote communities, kids of different ages come together and they're in different levels. So some of the kids are mixed in different classrooms according to levels. So it's a schoolhouse. And also I want to deinstitutionalize the horrible schools they had to go. And then I basically said it's a l'école maison. It's a schoolhouse. It's a house. And this is a region where it's about 12 different tribes at least come together. You meet a new family of friends, and then you become a big family. So this idea of a house as icon, as an ancient thing, was important for me to carry through to create a new identity for a school where kids wanted to go. And the thirdly, because I said the kids are in different level of learning, there are only 2 school teachers, we have 4 classrooms, and it makes it easy for teacher to circulate. They'll teach one classroom with kids, give assignments, run to the next classroom and take over. And also it makes some kids who said, oh, this lesson's too easy, I want to learn more. It gives them freedom to run to the next class. So it has different meaning of that. And also I cannot, it's very large, but as you said, in a place like empty place, it can be scaleless, but you can pinpoint it. Oh, that's where the school is. It's very easy to identify this bigger round schoolhouse. And their dwellings are by and large also circular. So this idea of going from their own smaller house with your family to another big house with larger families, it's kind of easy translation for kids to associate the relationship of their house and a schoolhouse.
Okay, so we are ending here. So thank you for joining us today. It was really good to see you and talk to you.
That's nice.
It was an amazing discussion. So I hope to see you in anywhere in the world in a physical way, not just from screen to screen. I hope it will end soon. So do you have a final words to share with our audience?
I hope everybody is doing well, and I hope, and in this very difficult time, architecture continues to give hope to others. So I think please carry your torches and ambitions and your desires, and please be well and healthy and safe.
Okay, thank you. Then see you soon.
See you soon. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.